been a long time since I have done a Unravelling Toxic Masculinity.
We have Lucas here. A gentleman offers chivalry only if it is earned in exchange for traditional ladylike behavior. You're offering me your time. Do you have any idea what my billing rate is? No, I'd be offering you my time. I think this is perhaps in response to you.
Chivalry is earned. So what you're saying is it's a first date. How do I earn you just being a gentleman and opening the door for me?
That's a great question.
Anyway, so again, here's this Andrew guy, but he's doing it, I guess, from chat, from his own home and not within their studios or whatever. But how is chivalry earned? Well, the idea of chivalry, some might say it's dead, but, you shouldn't treat women well or properly with common decency and respect because they're women. You should treat all people, before you know anything about them, with common decency, or maybe uncommon decency at this point, and respect, because that's what rational, reasonable, kind-hearted people do. Let's continue.
The idea here is just this. This used to just be baked into the pie, used to just be assumed. All women deserve chivalry. But why? Well, because if you go back 70 years ago, all the women who got married were virgins.
If he believes that, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn. There were many of people having premarital sex who ended up getting married 70 plus years ago. I mean, the idea that premarital sex started in the last 30, 40 years, that's BS. 100% pure, unadulterated BS. But also, it's just toxic. This is why this whole thing is called Unravelling Toxic Masculinity, because it's perpetuating the idea that somebody's value is based on the number of sexual partners that they have. So for women, in this case, their value is reduced, according to these losers, incel basement, types, or at least incel adjacent types, because this guy is surprisingly married. I'm sure she thinks he's cute or whatever, but taste is subjective, right? So, so for women, according to these idiots, their value is lessened by the number of sexual partners had, and conversely, a man's value is improved and seen as you're more valuable if you have more sexual partners. Again, this is antiquated, outdated, patriarchal standards that should make any decent person want to vomit, but these clowns are going to continue to perpetuate it because what they do on this podcast and other podcasts that are similar is they perpetuate toxic masculinity to their rabid, uninformed, incel, basement-dwelling listeners.
All virgins, they were all chaste, and they were pushing towards virtue. Now,
they were all virgins, all chaste. No, they were not all virgins. They were not all. Some might have been, and then some. I'm sure some of them who said that they were lied. But just as a reminder, though, as to why these men want chaste women, why these men want sexually inexperienced women, because they know what they're bringing in the bedroom is pure trash. They can't satisfy their women and I'll say their women because they treat them as property and not as partners, but they, understand that if somebody who they were to date and marry were to have previous sexual encounters, they're bound to be better than what these guys are bringing. And so they're afraid that the women would then leave them or cheat on them because they'll know that the sex is better than someone else, even though, because that's how they view women. They view women as these terrible people. They literally hate women. I don't know why they even bother dating or marrying them, because they hate them. The only reason why they would is because they hate them, but they view them as property to, have at their own whim or whatever. But goddamn, if a woman decides that she wants to have her own say in things, goddamn if she had decided to, have a little fun during college. I mean, I don't judge people for wanting to stay virgins. If that's your choice, that's your choice. But if you want to have fun and enjoy yourself with other people before getting married, more power to you. I'm not threatened by any of my previous partners' past sexual partners at least I hadn't been since I was like maybe 16 years old. Maybe at 16 years old, when I was very sexually inexperienced and didn't know what the hell I was doing, maybe at that point I would have been like, I'm afraid what if I'm not doing what, I could do to satisfy well, she's just going to leave me and cheat on me, whatever. And that was very short-lived. Now, I don't believe that at all. But that's what these people think. That's their mindset that they bring to the table.
Let's fast forward here into modernity. Raise your hand at the table if you're
into modernity.
You're a virgin. Yeah, now raise your hand at the table if you're not in a relationship. Yeah.
But here's what they do. Here is what this podcast would basically be like, I'm going to go find a bunch of women who are not in relationships, who are sexually active, so that I can then trash them for violating the standards that they believe should still exist in society, that they're trying to maintain, they're trying to conserve these standards in society. But, it's just like what, Steven Crowder does. Like when he goes and interviews, or many of the other conservative folks who go out to college campuses, who'll do interviews on the street, who you'll never see them interview somebody on our side of the aisle who will make a good point. Not because we don't make good points, but because they don't have any interest in having conversations with people who will automatically be able to disprove the BS that they're trying to spread. They only want to speak to people who they feel can get them hits when they own them, because they're coming at it from either an impassioned point of view or from maybe, they're not the most informed people either, but they only want the ill-informed people so that they feel intellectually superior. Because the only people that these people can feel intellectually superior to are people who are uninformed, uneducated, etc.
Ain't getting no chivalry. What are you getting for? What? What are you getting it for? What are you getting it for?
Basic respect.
Hang on. What are you
Basic respect.
And someone said basic respect. Exactly. People should have basic respect for fellow human beings. You should not be judging them for what they do. If it's not hurting you, then why do you have such a strong opinion about it? Because he sees his old ways of thinking going the way of the dodo, and he doesn't like it. Because maybe one day even his own wife might be like, you know what, it really could be better outside, and I'd rather be with somebody who, treats me like a partner and a human being and not a commodity and a property.
She says basic respect.
Yeah, it's just basic decency and respect. You
Yeah,
have
wait,
a lady.
Let me ask you a question.
Wait, hang on. If it's about decency and respect, I want flowers and my dinner paid for too.
We have Lucas here.
I want flowers, and well, maybe we should change, our system in this country to make sure that people have equal pay for the salaries and for the jobs that they do. And as such, maybe at that point you can have people, going Dutch or treating or whatever. Now, that being said, this guy clearly is not treating his partners or past partners very well, because I've had women take me out and pay for dinner, and I might have even had somebody buy me flowers. But the idea that he hasn't had that happen to him just goes to show you what a trash human being he is. Now let's go back to that second video, because this one's probably even worse.
Before feminism came around, where did this idea come from that women couldn't work before there was
you couldn't
feminism?
have a credit card till
Well, they literally
the 70s?
couldn't.
No.
Like, they couldn't have been.
No, listen. Men were responsible for their wives' debts. So you, as the wife, could go to the local department store and you could buy whatever you wanted to on your husband's credit, and he had to pay the debt. So yes, while it's true that they wouldn't give women credit cards, they gave it to the man, the woman could still go spend as much as she wanted to and never was responsible for the debt in the marriage, ever. No debtors ever came for her. She was never responsible for any of it. And the reason you think that this is why the world works is because of what's called standpoint theory. So
Let's get back to the standpoint theory for a second. Let's talk about some of the points that he made in this video. They couldn't get credit cards because women were not treated as full-fledged human beings. So he's saying that women should be happy, should have been happy being able to spend their husband's credit cards and not have to worry about repaying the debt because, That's the way that they could be freeloaders or whatever. Because again, they view women as freeloaders. They view women as leeches. They view women as people who should be subservient to them, and they don't like it when they're not. So they don't want women to be able to be independent, because if a woman can be independent, they don't need to settle for their BS. Independent women don't have to settle. I mean, they still might, but they don't have to settle to marry somebody so they can somehow survive in the world. And we're in a better place, in my opinion, that women can get their own credit cards. They can get their own loans. They can be financially independent. And because they're human beings, and all human beings should be able to have that ability to do so. But they don't like women being able to make their own decisions. But they're like, oh, you could use your hubby's credit card, so that makes it okay. Who cares about any dehumanizing that goes along the way, that comes along with the fact that you can't get your own credit card? Again, they're further perpetuating the idea that women are just gold diggers out for your money, which of course is not true. I mean, some might be. I mean, maybe Trump married somebody like that, but, it is what it is. Let's continue and hear his little talks about standpoint theory.
What standpoint theory is it's a feminist theory which says that history, because it's subjective, women's history needs to be told only through the prism of a woman and how a woman thinks about it, rather than what's objectively true. So they'll leave stuff like that completely out. They could work.
But see, the thing is he's picking and choosing what he's going to leave out. I.e., to him, you could go spend the money, but you couldn't leave an abusive relationship. You're in an abusive relationship. How are you going to get out if you can't have your own money, if you can't go work, if you can't be treated as a equal in the economy? If you can't do all that, you're not going to be able to leave the abuse that you're suffering. Right? But let's talk about this idea of standpoint theory, for a better standpoint feminism. Now, first of all, there is no reason why anybody should believe anything that this podcast in particular, the whatever podcast, has to say about feminism. Like, if they're presenting something about feminism, including this standpoint theory, you should automatically be suspect of it. Because even he claims that the feminists will leave out certain information, like, oh, women didn't have to pay off the debts that they incurred at the stores, but even though it should be fine that they can't get their own credit cards. No, they should be able to get their own credit cards because they should be able to support themselves without having to rely on a dude. But let's further look at it. He believes that you are not getting objective truths when you follow things like standpoint theory, because you are only looking at it through the perspective of, I guess, the marginalized person. In standpoint feminism, you're looking at it from the point of view of the woman, but in other situations, there might be other standpoints that you might listen to. So if you're somebody who rejects standpoint theory and are currently watching this video, I'm just going to make a point to you. I'm Jewish. Shocker. Most non-Jews should not get to tell people what Jewish life is like, what it is like living life as a Jewish person in this society. Now, I'll make exceptions. If you are a non-Jewish person and you go take like a Jewish world history class or many classes and you get a degree in Jewish history, and you are somebody who is scholarly and learned, and you know a lot about the Jewish experience in this world, on this planet for the last, 6,000 years, which is, kind of how long the Jewish calendar lasts. But, if they take the time to study that, then I'll give them, I guess, a pass on trying to talk about the experience of Jews in the world, in this country, etc. But the reason they will have gotten their degree and have been successful in their degree is because of the fact that they will have listened to Jewish people who told them and who explained their worldview and life from their perspective. There are absolutely objective realities that can only be known from the point of view of the people experiencing them. You can't know what it's like to be the victim of anti-Semitism. You can't know what it's like to be a Jewish person and watch something on TV like the attack that took place in Boulder, where the people were attacked simply for being Jewish and not for supporting Israel, as some like to say, but for wanting Hamas to release the Israeli hostages. How horrible of people to want terrorists to, not have hostages anymore and to release them and let them free. So why would if you can understand, if you unless you're Jewish mostly can't understand what it's like to be a Jewish person in this country, and we should be listening to Jewish people when it comes to how things affect them, why would it the same be true for women? Why should men get to say what life is like for a woman? We shouldn't. Only women should be able to say, this is my life experience as a woman. This is what I have to deal with. Now, there's been times when I've, talked about things that happened to me in my life, and I've had women friends who be like, welcome to womanhood for a day. Because this is what women have to deal with all the time. And instead of saying like, oh, that happened to me, so it's clearly not a woman's perspective thing, it's like, I'm very sorry y'all have to deal with that. I had to deal with it once. Y'all have to deal with it daily. So I will trust women when they tell me about their lived life experiences. I will trust black people when they tell me about their lived life experience. I will trust trans people to tell me what their lived life experiences are. I will not assume what they are. I can't know what they are. I am not a trans person. I am not a black person. Shocking, I know. I have to, as a reasonable person who tries to be honest, who tries to come at things with facts, logic, and reason, you have to listen to the realities from the standpoint of the people who are marginalized and oppressed. But these type of people make the arguments like, oh, well, women should be happy, should have been happy because you couldn't have debt collectors coming after you even though you spent the money. Because they only see it from their privileged point of view. These guys look at it and be like, oh, look at what these women get to do. They get to sit on the couch. They think, oh, women are like Peggy Bundy. They get to sit on the couch, eat bonbons, watch TV, not clean, and get the benefit while the husband's out working. That's how they view women. And then they take that straw man and say, well, I would like to live that way. Where are my flowers? Where are people buying me dinner? So they say. But again, these people are incels, or they're incel adjacent. And they basically hate women, so therefore they're not going to give any credence to any theory that allows women to explain how their lives are affected by societal norms, and how we should be changing societal norms based on what happens to them as women. Because the lived life experience as a woman is much different than the lived life experience for men. Anyway, what do you think? Agree, disagree? Leave your comments down below. Remember to like the video, share, subscribe to the channel. Unless you're a misogynist, have a good day.